Hi, I'm Bill, the domestic monk. So here we are. Today is Monday, October 4th, 2021. I am sitting in a beautiful orchard and pumpkin patch at a place called Hidden Acres Farm up in Meade, Washington. It's about 15 minutes north of Spokane. And it is beautiful up here. We also found this place through Boondockers Welcome. We were able to stay here for free. Of course, we're buying bags of apples and everything else around here. We raided their garden yesterday afternoon, picked some cabbages, peppers, tomatoes, cucumbers, zucchini, and we were able to cook all that up, so that was awesome. So here we are with another Mass review. This week, I want to give a thanks to my Curcio mate, Rob, who hails from this area. He knew we were going to be in Spokane this week, and he recommended we attend St. Aloysius Gonzaga Catholic Church in Spokane. And boy, I'm glad we did. That was an amazing experience. So we went this week to the Saturday evening vigil, which was at 5 o'clock. And we got there a little early, and that church is impressive. So a couple of weeks back, we attended St. Joseph's Catholic Church in Ogden, Utah, and that was beautiful and an impressive church. And this was similar, just impressive to look at. You walk up, and it is a massive building, two big spire towers on either side. It's funny, the facade of it has like kind of this white facade on the front. You get the impression of a fort or a courthouse. It was pretty cool. Big steps going up. There was a wedding actually just finished up as we were approaching, and there was a car all decked out in front. I think it was an old Mercury Comet. So it was pretty neat. You walk in that church, it is amazing. I mean, to me, that's what a Catholic church should look like. This is by far the most beautiful church I've been in on this trip. This thing was huge when you walked in. I mean, just 4 rows of pews, all facing forward. It was in the shape of a cross, too, which a lot of churches are. So you had the main section going up towards the altar, four rows of pews, like I said. And then up at the front, off either side, forming the arms of the cross, were 2 more seating areas with balconies up above it. And in the church, they had these pamphlets that talk about the history and layout and design of the church. This thing holds 1,100 parishioners. Like I said, it was massive. You had the main section, 2 sections off to the side, 2 balconies above the sections off to the side on either side of the altar. And then behind the church, they had a big balcony area up top with this massive organ. And there's some explanation on the organ in here too. Just a beautiful church. When you look at the front altar, it was amazing. Everything was in white Italian marble. Again, I learned from reading this document. The altar is something like, or the altar piece behind the altar is like 25 feet tall, and it's a depiction of the crucifixion with Mary on one side and I believe St. John on the other of the crucified Jesus. Either side of the altar they had a life-size or a very large Virgin Mary off to the left and St. Joseph off to the right, and it was just amazing. The Stations of the Cross were down both sides, well actually all the way around the church, starting up in the sections off to the side and came all the way around to the back of the church. And they were raised images encased in a golden frames. Each one of them were lit up by electric candles and were really impressive. But the most impressive thing were the stained glass windows. Down both sides of the main area of the church, they had 6 double, or so 3 on each side, but they were double sets of arched stained glass windows. Each one of them, and they were very Marian, each one of them depicted a scene. I guess they could have been mysteries of the Rosary, but also biblical scenes, of course. They had the Annunciation, They had the descent of the Holy Spirit, the Nativity, the crowning of Mary, and they were just gorgeous down both sides. And then above the altar is a big domed area behind the altar, and they had 5 stained glass windows up there, and they all, just like the church we attended in Flagstaff, Arizona, St. Francis de Assisi, they had those large paintings depicting significant events in the life of St. Francis. The same thing here. Behind the altar in that dome were all stained glass windows depicting significant events in the life of St. Aloysius Gonzaga. And he's an interesting saint too. So of course the college up there is named after him. There's a grade school named after him, and of course the church. He was a Jesuit, young guy, and a saint fitting for our times. He died treating people afflicted with the plague, and he contracted himself. He was 23 years old. He's a patron saint of the young, or of the youth. But another amazing Catholic saint. And I talked to the presiding priest before Mass briefly. And this church, even though it's situated right there adjacent to the campus of the college, the university, it's a diocesan parish. It belongs to the Diocese of Spokane. It is not formally affiliated with the university or the other schools there, although he told me that they do have a tremendous amount of interaction and support with the schools. So just a very, very impressive building to look at. I mean, you could just look around in there during that. Just a big arch, wooden arches over the top, the lanterns going down the center. I mean, everything in that church to me was beautiful. And as is most Catholic churches, you know, I mean, you go through this 30, 40 something points here that talk about the specific reason this church was laid out that way and what the significance of everything is. Catholic churches aren't laid out, you know, just kind of at whim. There's a specific liturgical reason typically for everything you see in a Catholic church, including the direction and everything else. So it's called a self-guided tour brochure, and it's interesting to read. And I can link to their website below if you want to learn more about that church. The Mass itself was a Novus Ordo style Mass. It was, so as far as attendance goes, it was not, this is the least attended service we've been to. As far as, you know, it was a very big church, but as far as the amount of people in it, I would say it was probably a quarter full, maybe to a third full. But it was a Saturday evening vigil and not a Sunday. Who knows, maybe the Sunday morning Masses are a little more well attended. Also, this was an older crowd. Not a lot of families and young in there, but it was a beautiful Mass. The homily, so the gospel this week was on marriage. The homily was good. The presiding priest talked about marriage generally, you know, and the importance of love. It was a good sermon, but the thing that I liked best about the homily this week, if there's one complaint I had with my former parish, and I came from St. Kilian Mission Viejo, I love that church. We had two great pastors, Father Angelos and Father Tuan. That church is very vibrant. My faith life grew so much under their leadership. So it's not a knock, but you know, these are my experiences. One thing that Father Angelos and Father Tuan did, which always didn't sit right with me, is they gave the homily from in front of the altar. And in this church, they had a beautiful white marble ambo off to the left side. And the priest went over there, read the gospel from there, and he gave the homily from there. And I feel like that is more reverent. Like the Mass, we're there to worship our Lord Jesus Christ. And the Mass isn't a retreat where the priest takes center stage. And that was one of the things, and Father Angelo's fantastic homilist. I mean, he gave great homilies. But I think it would have been just as effective if he did it from the pulpit, rather than coming up in front and being center stage. Again, that's just me, a personal preference that I have, and I thought it was handled really well in this service. As far as altar servers, they had two male altar servers at this Mass, and ironically, the priest mentioned that it's the first time they've had altar service since COVID, so they just brought them back, and just by the luck of the draw, we were there for that. The music in this Mass was fantastic, the best I have seen to date. You know, I've talked about this every week. Again, these are my experiences, what I prefer, not necessarily what's right or what everybody prefers, but the music here was amazing. Even my wife commented on it. So they had a single female cantor. She sang like an angel. It was beautiful. A grand piano, and then a flutist. And the flute music was fantastic. It was done great. I wouldn't change a thing about that. I mean, if I could take that music with me, that music set up to every Mass, perfect. So for communion this week, we're back to Eucharistic ministers. One of the things I really liked about last week, I liked a lot about last week at St. Francis Cabrini in Tacoma, or Lakewood, Washington, was that the priests handled the communion themselves. This week we're back to, I think they had 5 or 6 Eucharistic ministers. It was a big church, not a lot of people in it, but there was only one priest. So we were back to that. So the closing of the Mass, there were no closing prayers. We always say the St. Michael's prayer in the Diocese of Orange. When we were in Arizona, they said the Hail Mary and the St. Michael's prayer. Here they just did the announcements and the final blessing, which is what they did at St. Francis Cabrini last week. And maybe that's the way the diocese up here, or you know, how the bishop has orchestrated things up here in Washington, which is fine. I would say my experience overall at St. Aloysius Gonzaga Catholic Church in Spokane, Washington was fantastic. To me, that's how a Mass should be. The church was beautiful, the Mass was reverent, the music was amazing. It was just a great experience. I want to thank my Casillo mate Rob for pointing us in this direction. It was a great experience, and if you're in the area, I do recommend you drop by. So as always, and until next time, siempre adelante.